Hello. Hey, everybody. This is another episode of 90who10. I am your co-host, Jessica Entner, and I've got Mr. Dan Eisenstein with me.
Hello. Hello, everybody.
And today we have a very special guest because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for this man. We have my own father, famed guitarist and keyboard backup singer of Grassroots and music manager of many, many bands, Rage Against the Machine, Faith No More, Deftones, Quiet Riot. So I'm so excited to have my dad on here to talk about growing up in LA. He was also an LA kid, so he's got lots of stories. Hi, Dad. How you doing?
I'm overjoyed to be here.
Hi, Warren.
Hi, Dan. How are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you, buddy.
Happy to have you on. I'm really, I've known Jessica for 30 plus years and known you, for a while, but I'm really excited to talk to you and get to know a little bit more about, your growing up, your career, and learn some things today.
It was so long ago, I might have trouble with names, addresses, and phone numbers,
That's
right.
fine.
That's okay.
What was it? Klondike 555 or whatever?
Yeah, Klondike 1330. Phone
Wow.
number, Toledo, Ohio. Wow.
See, you remember those. What did you do yesterday? I'm just kidding.
Now you got me.
So just to start, you just had a really big birthday.
Yes, I did. And my daughters, Jessica and Lauren, threw me a wonderful 80th birthday the other week. And it was phenomenal. It was all my friends. It went through my whole past. People I met in grammar school, through college, the Army, the music business. I mean, it was phenomenal.
Creed from the Grassroots was there, and
Yeah.
your grandson was very excited about that because he got a little video with Creed from The Office.
Yeah,
no, it was great, and what was really interesting about that was we put together a kind of a "This Is Your Life" video where there was a lot of people that you've known your entire life, and then bands that you had managed to came on and said happy birthday. And what was really great, especially as your kid, is how many people really admire and loved you and thanked you for being a part of their story. I mean, we had Roddy Bottom from Faith No More. We had Billy Gold from Faith No More, Not a Surf. And the sentiment throughout it was, you're just a stellar dude. And as a daughter to somebody who is like you, it's always nice to, when I talk to other people in the music industry, because I work peripherally in it, the first thing out of them, oh my God, I love your dad. Your dad gave me my first job. Your dad was the first person I called, and he was like a mentor to me. Why aren't you so nice, and why do people like you so much? How did this all begin?
I have no idea. You kind of have a manner in which you deal with people, and that continues through all facets of your life. And if you're respectful of everybody that I remember an adage that came to me from one of the guys that I think it was Jerry Heller, one of my first agents, and Jerry Heller went on to have a huge booking agency, and then he was very instrumental in
NWA.
Ruthless Records.
I'm like trying.
Huge.
Oh my,
Yeah.
Huge.
And he said, listen, you want to be respectful of all of the people, because the guys that are at the bottom rung of the industry a lot of them are going to get to that top rung. And the same thing with, so you're going to meet people on their way down and on their way up. And if you give them respect, you'll receive that in kind. And those words stuck with me. So,
yeah. No, it is true. And you are one of those people who is admired, like throughout the industry, and also from your friends. I mean, you grew up in LA from the age of 10. So how many people are you still in touch with from like grammar school and high school?
We have another get together next Wednesday, and there's about a dozen of us getting together, and there's a group of us that have stayed in contact throughout our whole life. And it's like you guys, Dan, and you, Jessica, you guys still, I remember when you were just mere little pups, both of you, together, and
Yep.
beginnings of high school and so forth. So these are important things to hold on to throughout your life.
That's
Yeah.
nice. Yeah. And so you went to LA high school, Warren?
I went to Fairfax High School,
Fairfax.
which produced a lot of people in the music and entertainment.
Oh,
business.
yeah. I mean, what comes to mind for me with Fairfax High School is the Red Hot Chili Peppers. But during your time, I mean, who are some of the names that we would recognize that came out of Fairfax?
Before me, Herb Alpert,
Sure.
and Phil Spector, who we could talk about for a while because our paths crossed a few times.
Yep.
A couple of Guns N' Roses, Slash went there, and I think somebody else in the band did, but there were Steve Berry, producer, P.F. Sloan, songwriter, producer.
Who you worked with a lot.
Right. Russ Titleman, a major.
I think Steven Adler from Guns N' Roses. That's who you were thinking of. Yeah. But sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Sure.
Those are the ones that quickly come to mind.
Yeah.
Fairfax was like the Beverly High as well. Like there's a lot of kids that came out of Fairfax. I mean, LA schools, you can go back and like do the alumni list, and it's a lot of recognizable names from both Fairfax High School and Hollywood High School and Beverly Hills High School.
And when you were at Fairfax, were you playing music? Were you in a band? Were you in like the school band?
In junior high school, I was in the orchestra, and because I was playing drums, and so I was in the percussion section in the orchestra there. But then my older sister Elaine, was playing guitar. She was quite a musician. She was a great pianist. She wrote a lot of music for my brother-in-law's films, but she gave me my first guitar. And so I was in junior high school in the bedrooms strumming away to Buddy Holly, the Everly Brothers, and stuff like that at that time. And in high school, I'd go to a party and bring the guitar or something. But Russ Titleman and myself used to get together, and we were the Everly Brothers. We sang all the Everly Brothers two-part harmony songs. Both playing guitar and singing. And first of all, Phil Spector went to Fairfax High, and he recorded To Know Him Is to Love Him while he was a student there, and it became a big hit. After he left, and because he was about 5 years older than me, so he was about 20 years old. He was recording some other people, the Paris Sisters he had some hits with, and then he wanted to do a sort of a replica of the Spectors 3. I mean, a Spectre of the teddy bears. He wanted to, so he started a thing called the Spectors 3, and it was Russ Titleman, myself, and a classmate, Annette Morar, who ended up marrying Phil. Anyways, so we cut a song and didn't go anywhere. We did a TV show and one personal appearance or something like that. But it kind of whet my appetite for being on a stage, I think.
And just spending 1 minute on Phil Spector, I mean, how was he to work with? Was he easy, or was he already starting to show these signs of all these crazy stories you hear about him?
Yeah. I remember he came over to the house. And my mother says, "Ooh, he's kind of kooky, isn't he?"
That sums it up. That sums it up.
But he took us one night. God, I'm in the 11th grade, so I'm 16, and he took us to see Lenny Bruce.
Mm-hmm.
That was interesting, and then one night we went to a club in Hollywood, and it was late, and Elvis Presley was there with his group, his buddies, and there was around a piano singing songs, and that was something to see.
And how old are you? 16?
16.
Wow.
It sounds like you did a lot of the same things we did, like you get invited to these things at a young age and you're like, okay, and you're exposed to this kind of culture.
I wasn't in a band or pursuing that. I was cut to a couple of years later. I'm at UCLA. I'm in the film department. I was, wanted to get in that part of the business. And I was walking down Sunset and a limo pulls up. It's 1964. And the guy rolls down the window and it's Phil in the back of a black limo. And he says, hey, Warren, come on. What are you doing? I'm walking home from school or hitchhiking home from school. And we get in and we go to a drive-in for a burger. And he says, I've got a session tonight. Come on by. I'd love you to come to the session. So I, on my Lambretta motor scooter, go to Gold Star Recording Studio. And there is Phil in full Edwardian suit with the frilly cuffs and the puffy collars and so forth, and a lot of musicians, the Wall of Sound, all of the Wrecking Crew guys are in there, and I wish I could remember who they were. I remember Earl Palmer playing drums, Carol Kay playing bass, Sonny Bono doing percussion in the back. I believe Leon Russell was there playing piano, but it was all of the guys that were the Wall of Sound, and I'm a nobody in this session. And there's Brian Wilson, there's Mick Jagger. I mean, he's putting on a show as he's doing this thing. And it was for Ike and Tina Turner doing River Deep, Mountain High. But I kind of notice on the console, by the way, this is all 4-track recording in those days. On the console, there's a revolver on the, and I Phil, what's going on? He says, that's in case Ike comes. He had barred Ike Turner from the session. And there's Tina in the vocal booth. And it's a live date. I mean, 32 or so musicians and live singing, not cutting tracks and then putting the vocal on later. She's doing it live. And my mouth drops. I mean, she was just incredible. And so I've got to cut again to several years later. I've got a band I've got on as a manager on tour we were doing the UK and Europe, and we're in Scotland, and they invited the band to go on the air after one of their gigs at a radio station, and the DJ comes out and he goes, wait a minute, you know Phil Spector, don't you? And screw the band. I went in and he interviews me. And I come out because it's like, okay, and that's the end of the show. And I walk out and there's this band of mine giving me the evil eye, like, right.
That's hilarious.
That's great. That's a great story. So after this session, it sounds like, this spark maybe has been lit inside of you a little bit. And where do we go from here?
So I decided I wanted to take a break from school, from college. And a friend of mine, Joel Bernstein, was a budding designer, architect, whatever, but he was quite a good artist. So we went to Europe, 1965. I had my guitar. He had pen and ink drawings ready to go. And we put out a hat and I sang on the street and he did pen and inks. The whole year cost me $900. There was a book out at the time, Europe on $5 a day. We didn't have $5 a day between us. So there were so many amazing stories of how people took in some middle-class Americans, feeding us, housing us. I mean, just the most wonderful experience. And we went through Western Europe and then went to Israel. And while I was there, met another group of guys. They called themselves the Young Californians. It was a folk trio. And they were all from California. And we got jobs working as extras on a film being shot in Israel with Frank Sinatra and Kirk Douglas and It was Cast a Giant's Shadow, and we played British guys, British officers or British soldiers. But there was a little folk festival going on, so the young Californians signed up to do a couple of songs, and I signed up to do a song or two. And I think I sang a Buddy Holly, song or something like that. And
Not Fade Away.
No, I think I did Every Day. Every day, it's again. Yeah. We ran into a guy who said he wanted to be Brian Epstein. And he said, tell you what, I will house you guys and feed you and give you musical equipment and amps and drums and so forth. And we'll have a band. And we went, oh, somebody's going to house us and feed us. That sounds good. So we go to this house and there's the equipment and the amps and the drums and so forth. And we go, well, who's going to play drums? I go, oh, I used to play drums in junior high school. I want to be up front. So we all, anyways, it lasted about a week when we said, this is bullshit. And we all went our separate directions. But we exchanged phone numbers, and if you're ever in LA type of thing. So I come back, I go back to school, and I get a call from one of the young Californians. It was Creed Bratton. And he said, listen, I'm back in LA. Why don't we get together? Why don't we start a band? I'm going, hey, I've got classes at UCLA. Some of them start at 8 a.m. and so forth. So he said, well, my girlfriend's got a friend who's an agent and he knows of a bass player and that guy knows of a drummer. So we got together and we made a list of all of the songs that we knew everybody was writing a list of songs that they knew the chords, then the melody and the lyrics to. And so we all had, okay, what do we know in common and what song should we do? And we rehearsed for about 2 days and we got a gig at this bar in the valley, and there was a stage, but it had a swing in the middle of the stage that a girl in a bikini would go back and forth on while we were singing. So the microphones are here. You got to get out of the way or you're going to get hit in the head with a swing. I don't know if you remember, there was a band that had a song, Don't Bogart That Joint.
Of course we do.
The Fraternity of Men. They were in there the week before us. And I think they were unloading their equipment when we were coming in or something. They're going, good luck.
Yeah.
That was our first gig. If that didn't turn me off to the club scene, but we kept doing it in LA until I said, listen, I'm getting home at 3:30 in the morning and I've got an 8 o'clock class and I'm not dropping out of school for this. Let's make some demos. And if something happens, great. If not, I'm off. So that's what we did. And lo and behold, we got an interest and a deal pending, and our bass player was drafted. Now, this is 1966, end of 66, and things were full bore Vietnam, and we were we got to keep him out somehow. It didn't work. We waved goodbye and we went, God, the label goes, we want a meeting with you guys. We're going, we better find a replacement quick. And a friend of mine at UCLA was in the film department. He said he played bass and so forth. I said, come with us. You're in the band. Stand in back. And so he passed the test. We all passed the test. But he goes, man, I want to play the blues. Okay, off he went. And so we put a notice up at the Musicians Union, and that's how we found Rob Grill, who answered the call, and he stuck with the band all those years.
And were you guys already called the Grassroots at this point?
No, we were called the 13th Floor.
Okay.
Dunhill Records had, as a vehicle for P.F. Sloan and Steve Barry, who by that time were a pretty hot songwriting team. They wrote Secret Agent Man and You Baby for the Turtles and something for Herman's Hermits. And so they were doing just fine. They wanted their own vehicle for their songs.
Mm-hmm.
And although we wanted to do our own material, they were going, well, you know, we can give you a head start. We have the name that Sloan and Barry picked was the Grassroots, which is better than the 13th floor because there's already a 13th floor elevators up in San Francisco. So, okay, all right. So we were put on hold for a while they were working out the deal. But the head of the label, Jay Lasker, was in Italy and he heard a song and he said, I want these kids to do it, you know. Okay, what is it? It's called, in Italian, it was written by an English group in Italian, a band called The Rokes. They had a song that was, in English, was Let's Live for Today.
Mm-hmm.
And so Creed and I worked on a bridge and so forth. I wish we claimed part writers.
Oh yeah, this is a very different time with the songwriting splits.
Yeah,
too. Yeah.
Who knew? We were just trying to make something better. And I'm still at UCLA, so we go into a session. We're augmented by some studio musicians. Hal Blaine on drums, Bobby, I forgot his name, on bass. Sloan and I and Creed are playing guitars. It was a 10 o'clock session. We cut the track, and at 11 o'clock, we put the vocals on. We broke for lunch, and we don't have a B-side. I wrote a B-side during lunch, and came back. We recorded that. It was on This was on a Monday. They mixed it the next day. And the following Tuesday, it was on 98 major radio stations throughout the country. And I went, this is the easiest gig in the world. You know, I mean, and it shot up the charts and so forth. And so the band, the label, let's go, you know, you got to support the record. Oh, and we were recording other stuff to make an album during that period. And they said, let's go on the road. And it was like March, April. I go, hey, I've got June, I graduate. I'm not throwing away all this time I've put in here. So everybody kind of cooperated and stuck by me. And so we postponed it. And then June, off we went in a van with one roadie and saw parts of the country I'd never seen before. So it was pretty exciting, that whole first part of being in a band.
What year is this about? 67?
67, summer 67.
How old were you at that time?
I was 23.
Yeah, going on the road in a van.
Yeah,
23 years old. Hit
at
record. I can only imagine.
But at this point, he had, you skipped over. We don't need to spend any time really, but he did straight out of high school. You went to boot camp. You went to the Army.
Right.
And so
It was a sort of a popular thing that was happening with guys that I knew that were planning to go to college, and instead of being drafted later on or going into college ROTC and coming out as an officer, as my brother-in-law did, there was a program, the Army Reserve or Army National Guard, 6 months active duty. And if you're under 18 and a half, you have, a certain amount of active reserve and then standby reserve. So I went in the day after graduating from high school and got it out of the way. So that's 1961. That was the most fortunate thing because, then the war in Vietnam heated up big and guys all over the place were getting drafted, etc. Not only drafted, getting killed. And they were not at that time activating reserve units like they have been for the last 20 years, where Just these reservists keep going in multiple tours.
But you did a lot of travel before you went on tour, and you got a travel bug. I mean, when you translated your career from being in a band, and then now you're managing bands and artists, you have the experience of being where they were, so you have an understanding of that. But you also love to travel, so it was like the perfect job for you, really. It's like you get to travel and there's music. So after the band kind of, you guys what were the years that you were super active? 67 to 70?
74, early 74.
And it was before me.
What was that like, though? I mean, first of all, I'm thinking of that time, the late 60s, the early 70s, freedom, love, drugs, all rock and roll, all that stuff. And here you are, you're in this band, you guys got a hit record, you're out on the road, you're seeing new parts of the country, probably meeting a whole bunch of new people that are interested in you because of what you've got going on. What was that time like? Let's hear some great stories about that time. Maybe ones Jessica hasn't heard before.
My daughter around. No. It was a hell of an exciting time. First of all, we had only done, a limited amount of live dates playing in clubs. And playing in clubs, we were doing 5 sets a night, 6 nights a week. It was a grind. It was, but when we started traveling and playing different places, we met all of these different bands. We were on bills. We were on the same bill as Creedence Clearwater, Cream, the 1910 Fruit Gum Company,
Grateful Dead.
Raymond, who?
Grateful Dead.
Grateful Dead. We were on a bill with the Doors, the Byrds, Janis Joplin, Brenton Wood, and the headliner was a young girl by the name of Janice Ian. Out of all of those artists, Janice Ian was the headliner, and we did maybe 6 cities as that kind of tour. But it was mix and match all over the place. We'd play with just so many different artists.
Growing up in LA and then kind of getting, because you've lived in LA your whole entire life. You and I both grew up on the Sunset Strip, ironically. Like where we both grew up is strangely within like blocks of each other. Right. And what was it like being, this is an interesting question I've never asked you, but what was it like being famous in a city that you knew so well with people that knew you from childhood? At your birthday, it was great to hear some of your friends who knew you before you became, I don't look at you as famous, but like before you became famous, how did you kind of navigate that? Like, because you're not in a small town, were you just running the city? Like you knew everybody and so you had it down?
There was a point there early on when the royalties from that B-side from Let's Live for Today bought me a white Mercedes convertible. And like every guy that makes his first money, especially in LA, got to have the car. So I was driving down Sunset Strip, and an English girl that I knew was in the next car, and I go, "Hey, how are you?" She said, "What are you doing?" "Gonna have lunch," blah blah blah. And I joined them for lunch, and her girlfriend was a beautiful young lady by the name of Rosemary Franklin, and I fell in love, and we became a duo. And Rosemary was Britain's first Miss World, so she was gorgeous. And anyway, we got married.
You can't even tell me what trouble you guys got into, but I can only suspect. You guys were like out and about with the outfits.
Yeah. Like we didn't live in the fast lane. We were in the middle lane, and we'd veer into the fast lane every once in a while. But
But you were together doing it.
Yes, and we had a daughter that's on camera right now. But I literally growing up on the Strip, the Sunset Strip, for you people that have heard about it and see, on movies and so forth, the Strip is about a 1.5 mile area, and it's in West Hollywood. I went to West Hollywood Elementary School. We lived up the street. Around the corner was a Bank of America, which turned into the Whiskey A Go-Go. It was just such a different thing when I was growing up, and what it evolved into. So, the Strip I wasn't enamored by the whole glossy, I'm got a hit record, I'm famous. I mean, it was sort of like there were a lot more famous people that were on the Sunset Strip than I ever aspired to.
No, but you were around, again, like you grew up and going to Fairfax High School where you already had these random relationships with people like Phil Spector. You know what I mean? Like that's an interesting thing where you were already kind of, I don't want to say you were already part of that scene, but you were already known in LA. You know what I mean? Like there was definitely a comfort level probably that you had because you came from this area where it was like, yeah, it's no big deal. I got a hit record. I can totally see you like that. You got the car, you got the girl, but you're like, of course it's like, I just.
Well, and I still wasn't secure. I never felt myself as years progressed, and we did have a nice run of hit singles and so forth, and we were a top 40 band. I mean, there was no doubt about that. We had our shot to kind of establish ourselves with our own writing, and it did okay, but not the kind of stuff when we were picking songs from other songwriters. I saw the writing on the wall that the hits were not in the top 15, they were top 10. They were all of a sudden, it was top 30, a top 40, top 60. And I said, I'm leaving. I mean, it just felt like, it had run its course. And I felt I was not the consummate musician or driven to be the most consummate musician like Stephen Stills, Neil Young, guys who just went from band to band and, that was their life, playing music, singing music, writing music. And so but I loved the business, and I had really tried to keep my eye on other facets of the music industry while I was in the band. So when I made a decision that, and I'm going to go down another path, I wanted to produce records and manage and so forth. And I was doing that simultaneously until those hours of in the studio until 4 a.m, but wanting to be in an office at 10 a.m. kind of got to me. And I really had to pick one over the other. And it fell into place of more of the management end of things. It was really interesting because I really thought, I know a bunch of these executives and people in the music industry from being in the grassroots. Well, when I tried to use those parlay it with the people I knew, you're an artist. You don't belong on this end of the desk. It was really a wake-up call of how artists are perceived versus the suits. So I had to really explore and cultivate a whole different set of contacts, and that was probably the hardest part. For a couple of years. It was pretty difficult and an uphill battle until I was meeting people that really didn't know I was a former musician, formerly in a band, all that kind of stuff. And I remember when I met one guy who became a very close friend, but I remember him talking to his friend while I'm there, and he's going, another guy I have to teach how to be a manager. And I went, hey, I've been in this business longer than you, but because he didn't know what my background was. And I was fine keeping it that way.
Would you say on the flip side of that same coin, though, as difficult maybe it was to break in with the suits, that it was maybe the bands felt, oh, this guy understands us. He's been here. He knows we're.
Yes. I've been there I've been there, and
Yeah.
I understand that aspect of it. And part of it was to really fight for a band's concept of what they were about, because I was put in the situation of a label saying this is the path that you're going to go down. And my management philosophy was, guys, you're going to dictate the path, and I'm going to try and knock out all the roadblocks that you might be facing. When I first started managing, the guy I went into business with had a concept that image over content. Image was such a big thing. He came from advertising. So it was, and I learned after 3 or 4 years of dealing with that kind of philosophy, I said, no. It's got to be content first and foremost.
That's still valid now, by the way.
Yeah, for sure.
Still, especially with the amount of content we have.
Yes.
And who was your first big band that you were working with, and what was that like?
When I got involved with this, it was a British company I went into a joint venture with. And they had these associations with managers or producers. And so I had a similar type of thing of bringing in new artists and so forth. But one was a band called Angel on Casablanca Records. Mm-hmm. And this was the image over content, although they were good players and so forth, but they were all in white, big, long, flowing hair. They were on Casablanca Records, the same label as Kiss.
Yep.
So they were to be the antithesis of Kiss. Mm-hmm. Kiss is all black. This is all white.
But Casablanca was also a big disco. They had like Donna Summer and
yes,
it was Neil Bogart.
Yeah, Neil Bogart.
Summer camp with his son Evan Bogart, who I just talked to a couple days ago.
Yeah, so. Brad. I know Brad, his other son. Yeah.
So it was a nutty time. It was the heyday of indulgences. They were all
hedonism.
Yeah, and so Angel was
there was another one that had another band signed to RCA, and it was an American, a British guy, and an Australian. And Steve Kipner was the Australian guy. Went on to write some hits for Olivia Newton-John and other people. The other guy, Peter. Was he was in Player and
but Baby Come Back, right? Isn't that Player?
Right. But it was in a band where the three of them made, and it was a terrific record. It went nowhere, unfortunately. But I did find this little band that somebody come out to some rehearsal hall out in the valley, and I go out to Burbank, and there's this young band. They're 19 years old, 20 years old at the most. It had this amazing guitar player and a singer who really wanted to be either Steven Tyler or Rod Stewart. And it was a little band called Quiet Riot. And I took them under my wing and got them a deal. Well, it was very difficult to get them a deal, I should say. It was no Los Angeles-based label wanted them whatsoever. So there was a Buddha Records, which was Neil Bogart's label way back when, signed them, and we started making the record, and Buddha Records goes belly up. They go bankrupt. And they go, well, you're out of your contract, keep the tapes. Yeah, what the heck? So I invested my money to finish the record and then took it around, and no one wanted them. I went to England. No one wanted them there. I shouldn't say they didn't want them. They said, you have to get an American label first, and then we'll take them on. I went to Germany, same thing. I went to Holland. I got on a plane. I went to Japan. One of the greatest stories, there was a a man who was the respected godfather of the Japanese music industry, Tatsu Nagashima. And I did get an introduction to him. He was the first meeting I had in Tokyo. And he says, and I had a bunch of photographs and stuff of the band. Tell me if I'm going on too long, but this is one of these amazing.
Interesting. I want to hear this. Yeah.
So he says, I said, listen, Nagashima, I want to give you the publishing on this band if you will help me introduce me or help me get a label to put out the record. And he goes, you believe in this band? I go, yes, I do. He goes, I don't, then why would you give me something? I said, well, I don't know anybody here and so forth. And I thought that he says, I'm going to sign this band. And here is a 3-record deal. And here's X amount of dollars. And he gets on the phone right then and there. And he calls Warner's Japan and says, I've got a guy here, Warren Entner, and he's got a band I just signed. And then it was in Japanese. I couldn't understand what he was saying, but I could. The thing that I got about it is he's talking to the head of Warner's, and he's saying, Sony Records is really, they're jumping up and down for this thing. Hangs up, calls Pioneer, RCA Pioneer, and says, Warner Brothers is jumping up and down wanting this thing. And then he calls Sony and says, they're
created the buzz.
I go back to my hotel and the phone is ringing off. I'm being wined and dined and so forth and so on. I'm going. And I signed the deal with Sony, and they gave me enough money to recoup what I put into it, but also to make another record. So we made another record back in the States and still could not get this band signed here. So their only deal was in Japan. And I felt terrible because I was banging my head against the wall, and I really thought this could be something. The guitar player was a young man by the name of Randy Rhodes, came to me, and he was such a sweet kid. And he says, listen, I said, maybe you guys have to find another manager. I've turned over every leaf I can. So he says, well, somebody says I can audition for Ozzy Osbourne's new band because he left Black Sabbath. And I'm going, oh, you got to be kidding. Do you know his reputation and all, because Ozzy was pretty out there. Wild. He came back and he said, I got the gig. I didn't even have to play. I was just warming up, doing his little finger exercises when he got hired. And wow. he went into Ozzy's, and he also took with him our bass player, Rudy Sarzo. So, there was the beginning of Ozzy's new career. Off they go. I let them out of the contract. I did not want to place any kind of restrictions on them I did what I could for them, and it didn't work out. So why hamper what they might be able to achieve? I went through a pretty bad period.
I got to stop you there for 1 second. Yeah. Just because, I think that really goes to show what kind of guy you are, that you're a good guy. You hear these stories of all these record executives, they got a contract on somebody and they got a chance to make a penny. They're not going to let that person go. And you're not that way. You have a music background. You know what it's like to try to struggle and make a career, but you're just a good guy. And that's a great story. And it just goes to show, Jessica in the beginning talked about what a great guy you are. That's because, you're her dad, but this is a great story just pointing to, and I think of you the same way, Warren. It just points to what a good guy you are. Let
me tell you how it comes back. Because, I went through such a rough time trying to establish myself as a manager.
How many years in is this, by the way? Just to...
I left in 74, so this is 75 years, up to 79.
Yeah.
Okay. 1980, I'm hurting. I went through all of my royalties, all of my stuff, just trying to keep my head above water to try and establish myself in a new career.
Mm-hmm.
I even took a situation where I was running the same recording studio that the Grassroots used to record in, and Steely Dan recorded there, blah, blah, blah. And I was trying to get it back on its feet. And my ex-partner in the Angel group days left the industry, and he was producing a film in Australia, and he said, would I be the music supervisor on it and so forth. I went to Australia for 4 or 5 months, had a ball down there. The Australian scene was just starting to make a big impact with Men at Work and In Excess,
Boingo Boingo,
the Divinals, you know, a whole bunch of, you know, great bands. And I almost stayed there, you know, because maybe I would be a conduit for these Australian bands to get them to the US. But boy, it's a long way away. And I had this young Jessica who was 6 years old at the time.
I was 3. I was about 3 or 4. Yeah, I was. This was 1981, 82. Yeah,
so
not that old.
So I came back and from Australia, and I get a call from somebody who says, hey, listen, can we come and meet with you? And I go, I don't know if I want to be a manager. You know, I'm burnt out and beaten up by trying to establish myself over the last 5, 6 years. And he comes over with the band, and it was Quiet Riot. It was Rudy Sarzo and Kevin and the new guitar player, Carlos Gavazzo, and the new drummer, Frankie Bonelli. And they played me the record. They did get signed by a little label called Pasha Records, which was affiliated with Epic Records. And they played me this record, and I'm going, whoa, this is really a great record. And then I'm going, they go, well, will you manage us again? And I'm going, oh shit, not this again, not this again. Well, it was such a good record. I said, okay, you know, fine. Let me meet these guys at Sony and so forth, and at Epic Records. And they're going, yeah, nice little record. Yeah, okay. You know, you're on a subsidiary label. You don't get the same kind of attention that the direct signings to Epic Records would get.
Right.
I said, well, let me just go on the road. And my whole thing was, if a band, I wanted to be involved with bands that weren't dependent upon hit songs. That's what my career was based on. And it was, I'm dependent upon radio programmers to define my future. They're not the most reliable guys to base your whole career on. But if a band is great live, you can build a following, as I saw while I was in the Grassroots, of like Grand Funk Railroad selling out 2 nights at the Forum. You know, I mean, it was a lot of examples of great live artists that had a devoted audience, and they weren't dependent upon top 40 radio. So I said, hey, we got to get this band on the road. Give me some money to get this band out on the road. They gave me, I don't know, $5,000 or something like that. I rent a Winnebago, and I'm driving this thing with the band, and we'd play a place, and there'd be 19 people there, and play another place, and there's 35 people in the club, and we played the same circuit, came around again. Well, those 19 people now have 160 people at the club, because the word of mouth just started traveling and compounding it. So what we're doing this repeatedly, and we saw there is something here. The band is touching their audience. They are communicating and getting word of mouth, which is the best device that you can, that you can have to kick off a career. And we cut a little video. MTV was just starting, and it got on MTV. It was Bang Your Head, but it didn't really jack things up through the roof. And I remember speaking to the head of marketing in Sony in New York, and he's going, great job, great job. You're going to do 250,000 records. you know, it's time to make another record and we'll get to gold next time. And on the third record, if you were lucky enough, we can get a platinum out of this. I'm going, give me some money to make another video. There's a song on here that deserves to be taken seriously and promoted. Well, I'm going, just, give me money to do one more video. And if it doesn't happen, I'm out of here and make another record. That's it. Well, we did the video for Come On, Feel the Noise, and it exploded. Instead of selling 250,000 records, at that time it sold 6 million records and went to #1. And it was the first debut heavy metal band that ever reached #1. So it was going through the roof, and that was a roller coaster ride that was just phenomenal to experience.
Because a lot of people don't know that was a cover either. That was a Slade song.
The Slade song.
Was that a big song in the UK for Slade?
Funny enough, your mother and I used to go back and forth to London, even though the Grassroots never played there. But while I was in the Grassroots, we'd go to England a lot to visit her folks. But we had a lot of friends in London, and we had a great time. I remember seeing Slade over there on top of the Pops all the time. And
they were huge there.
They were huge. And Come On, Feel the Noise was big. It was a big single.
But not in the States.
No.
So when that song went #1 in the States, it was like the first time Americans had really heard that. Because I know people that are music buffs that don't know that it's a cover.
Right.
And was that something that how did they come up? I'm interested in this side. How did they find that song? What was it that made them want to cover that?
When the band played me a finished record, it was done with the producer, Spencer Proffer, whose label was Pasha Records. And I imagine Spencer, or the band, because there was they used to do a cover every once in a while in clubs all the time. But so it was already on the album that I heard for the first time. And that was one of the reasons where I went, geez, there's a couple of things here that are just fantastic.
And do you think, so that kind of like snowballed the next part of your career and working with all the big bands you work with in the 90s? And it's interesting because you said bringing it back full circle, just to touch on that. I mean, if you probably wouldn't have let Randy and Rudy out of their contract, who knows if Rudy would have came back to you with this record?
It's very possible.
So it sounds like in the early part of your career, you're working with unknown bands that are trying to get broken. As this success happens, are you now starting to work with bands that already have some traction under them?
Both.
I
was still looking at unknown, unsigned bands.
Yep.
And also I was getting some calls from some record companies. Once you stick your shingle out, it has some success, they know your phone number. And that was fortunate. So with whether it was record company A&R guys or attorneys in the music business or agents or whatever, they would start looking for somebody that has some experience in how to break an artist. And I think that was one thing I was trying to at least get a reputation of. I know how to break an artist. And
because I mean, when I met Jessica in high school, I think at that time you had Faith No More, and that was like, I mean, as big as you could get at that time.
Well, it was funny how I went down that path. Because of Quiet Riot, a lot of bands in that genre, which I would put as, glam rock, hair bands, hard metal, whatever, because I managed Faster Pussycat on Elektra Records and Black and Blue, which they were supposed to be the American Def Leppard on Geffen Records. So there were 3 or 4 of that style. And then I said, I don't want to be pigeonholed as I only know how to do a glam rock band. And I got a call from a little label called Slash Records and said, we've got a band we'd love you to take a look at. And I went over to their building, and the A&R person, this young lady, I can't remember. I feel bad. I can't remember her name offhand. But she opens up her window in her office and she says, let's go in my office. And she opens up the window and climbs out the window, which is on the roof of the Slash building. I'm going, okay, this is a lot different than CBS Records and Elektra Records and all of that. And I loved that they were just, they were all just a small company that had a lot of punk stuff. Plus, they had, I'm sure they had the Germs X, but they did have Los Lobos and things like that as well. So they introduced me or played me this thing of a band called Faith No More, and I go, that's interesting. And they go, no, when we have distribution through Warner Brothers Records and so forth, blah, blah, blah. And I go, well, I'd like to meet the band. Well, they live in San Francisco. I go, okay, I'll go up to San Francisco. I met 4 of the 5 guys up there, and they were all really bright and terrific guys. I really liked them right away. 2 of them went to Berkeley, to University of California. They were all college guys, but they were into music. They were
music nerds.
Yeah. I go, where's the 5th guy? Where's the lead singer? Oh, he's in LA. He lives in LA. I go, how do you guys get together? Well, when we have a gig, we'll either go down to LA or he'll come up here and so forth. And they already did a club tour with the Chili Peppers, and they had a bread van. They lived in the delivery
bakery van.
Yeah. They lived in a delivery truck.
That's actually, if you think about it, for a band, that is a really smart thing to do. It's like, it's my home, it's my studio, it's my office.
Yeah. Anyway, so I said I'll meet Chuck at a restaurant near the record label, and I'm waiting. All of a sudden, the guy shows up on a skateboard. It's Chuck, and so we talked and so forth, and we did several gigs together, and got him on the road again. And then it was sort of like, this is not happening. What do you guys want to achieve out of this? And they said, if we can sell 25,000 records, we'd be really happy. I go, 25,000 records. I'm sorry. Let's think bigger than that. It became apparent that they weren't going to be able to do it with Chuck as the lead singer.
And was he just one album? Because I know We Care a Lot was right. The one song that had Chuck that did well. That's that right. People remember. Yeah.
Right.
So when you met Chuck, he was the guy that was people know him from We Care a Lot, and that was his
exactly.
Okay.
I've got to say, unfortunately, Chuck was not that motivated. He was not the most dependable person. I feel terrible saying this about him, because we had a reconciliation after I had him leave the band, and he understood where I was coming from, which made me feel a lot better than sort of I'm taking something away from somebody, and anyway, so it was time to find a new person to sing, be the singer, the front man for this terrific band. And maybe that's where I should take a pause here.
Yeah. So, you have so many stories, and we're enjoying listening to them because you have decades of music knowledge and history. We're going to put a pin in this episode, and we're going to wrap it up for today. But we are going to have part 2 of this coming up in our next episode, so you can hear about the Faith No More and the Rage Against the Machine era and the Deftones and L7 and basically my whole high school and why I was a delinquent. Just kidding.
So glad to hear
that. So I'm excited to have you back, but we're going to wrap up this episode. Dad, I love you. It's always fun to listen to your stories.
Warren, thank you so much. This was such an education for me. Well, I'm really excited to learn more in part 2.
It's kind of fun for me to do this. This is not something I talk about all the time. So thank you for giving me this forum.
Totally.
Yeah, we're excited. We're excited to learn more. We're gonna take a little break here, and we'll be back with part 2.
Yeah, thank you guys for joining 902. No, not 90210. It's 90who10.
90who10.
And our guest today has been Warren Entner, my dad, and my fun historian of all things Los Angeles.
I gotta say
until
one
next
last
time.
thing before you sign off. As if I was watching you, Jessica, and your dad tell the stories, it was usually you think of the parent being proud of the child. When your dad was telling these stories, I could just see you beaming with pride, and it was so nice.
I'm just so happy we're catching these. I'm so happy
Yeah.
that I know these stories. I look at this guy. I love him. He's a good one. I
great.
got a good
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll see you
All right.
again with the second part. So thank
All
you
right.
guys for joining this episode.